Welcome to another ACCA Technical Edge deep dive. Today we're diving into communicating core values and mission. Whether you're hearing this on your commute, during a study break, or right before an exam, I've got you. By the end of this deep dive, this technical topical is going to make a whole lot more sense. Let's get into it. So, imagine sitting in a corporate boardroom, right? You're writing this flawless, mathematically perfect mission statement about, like, saving the planet and empowering your workforce.
Right. Sounds great on paper.
Exactly. Only to find out a month later that 96% of your employees either don't know it exists or just don't believe a single word of it.
Yeah, which is, I mean, that happens way more often than you'd think.
Oh, totally. And if you're staring down the business and technology exam right now, it's so easy to treat this topic as just, a list of vocabulary words to memorize.
Right, just definitions.
Yeah. But learning Objective E5 isn't just an exam hurdle. It's a massive structural pillar of any successful organization. It's about how a company actually breathes life into its strategy.
It's great to be diving into this one. And you hit the nail on the head with that opening scenario because in the real world, executives get so caught up in the heavy math of strategic choice, or the complexities of environmental analysis.
Oh, yeah, the spreadsheets?
Exactly. They treat communication as a secondary, soft skill. But the reality is, if you can't clearly communicate what your company stands for, the entire strategic framework just collapses.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can talk about the mechanics of how a company communicates, we need to know exactly what they're trying to say, right?
Yeah.
We throw words around like mission and values all the time, but they can feel, incredibly abstract.
Very abstract, yeah.
I always like to think of it mechanically. Having a mission statement without core values is kind of like trying to run high-end software on a corrupted hard drive.
I like that.
Right. Like the user interface, which is the mission statement, it looks beautiful, and it tells you exactly what the program is supposed to do. But the moment the employees try to actually execute a command, the whole system crashes.
Because the underlying code doesn't support it.
Exactly. The core values are the code.
Okay.
But if we look at the actual syllabus definitions, how do we distinguish a formal mission statement from, say, just a really catchy advertising slogan?
Well, that corrupted hard drive analogy is a much more accurate way to look at it than the typical, rules of the road metaphor we usually hear. To get technical and define our terms, we look to the Johnson, Scholes, and Whittington framework.
Right, the gold standard.
Yeah, the absolute gold standard for corporate strategy. They define a mission as the organization's most basic purpose. It answers the fundamental questions like, what is this organization for? Why does it exist? It's their raison d'etre.
The ultimate why of the company.
Exactly. Then you have the mission statement. And that is simply the act of formalizing that mission by writing it down. Johnson, Scholes, and Whittington define it as a statement of the overriding direction and purpose of an organization.
Okay, got it.
And just to clarify the terminology for everyone listening, the terms vision and mission are treated as meaning the exact same thing in this context.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah, for the exam, they're completely interchangeable.
That makes sense. But what about the core values? Where do they fit into that underlying code?
So core values are defined as the principles that actually guide an organization's actions. If the mission is the ultimate destination the software is trying to reach, the core values are the ethical and operational algorithms that dictate how the system behaves under pressure.
Ah.
And a comprehensive mission statement usually addresses a few key structural things, like what business the company is actually in, who their stakeholders are, the benefits they deliver to those stakeholders, and of course, those underlying core values and ethics.
Which brings me back to my question about advertising slogans. Because if I hear Nike's "just do it," that sounds like a guiding principle, right?
Right.
It's incredibly motivating, it's printed on millions of shirts. Why isn't that a mission statement?
Well, what's fascinating here is that while organizations are free to format their internal documents however they want, a slogan is inherently built for a completely different purpose. I mean, just do it. It's a brilliant, powerful advertising slogan.
Oh, that's
But
right.
it does not qualify as a mission statement because it completely fails to carry any structural weight. It doesn't address the actual business the company is in or who the stakeholders are or the ethical framework.
Right, doesn't say anything about how they actually operate.
Exactly. It doesn't tell an investor how profit is generated, and it certainly doesn't tell a supply chain manager how to source materials ethically. A mission statement has to do that heavy lifting.
So the mission statement is the heavy lifting. It's the document that actually outlines the purpose and the ethics. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, why do organizations pour so much time and money into creating these documents?
Yeah.
Why does it actually matter to the people reading them?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it matters because different stakeholders have vastly different needs, and the organization has to answer to all of them consistently.
Right.
Investors need to know exactly how the organization intends to make a profit so they can calculate risk. Employees and directors need a sense of purpose. They need to know how the company intends to add value so they can, prioritize their daily tasks.
Makes sense.
And customers want to know exactly what promises are being made to them before they hand over their money.
So everyone needs a different piece of the puzzle, but it all has to come from the exact same box.
Precisely. Take Tesco, the massive UK supermarket chain, as an example. Their mission explicitly focuses on earning the lifetime loyalty of their customers.
Lifetime loyalty, okay.
Yeah, and that isn't just corporate speak thrown on a wall. That core value trickles down to literally every operational decision they make.
Right, because if your actual goal is lifetime loyalty, you can't just trick a customer into buying a bad product once to make a quick buck.
Exactly, and we saw this put to the ultimate test. In January 2012, Tesco announced its results, and they suffered a massive 16% fall in their share price.
Oh, 16%. That is a total free fall.
Well, yeah.
I mean, for most executives, a 16% drop means instant panic mode. You start slashing prices, laying off workers, cutting corners, just to make the next quarterly report look slightly better.
That is exactly what usually happens. But because Tesco's mission was so deeply rooted in customer loyalty, the CEO didn't just blame the broader economy or arbitrarily slash prices.
What did he do?
He publicly stated that the company needed to reconnect with customers. He acknowledged they needed to sharpen up the quality and availability of their goods. And to fix it, they invested cash directly into staff training.
Oh, I love that. Because by training the staff, the physical checkout experience becomes better, right? Which means the customer doesn't leave the store frustrated.
Exactly.
Which ensures they actually come back next week to buy their groceries again. That is the literal mechanism of lifetime loyalty in action. The core value completely guided the crisis response.
It really did.
The sources also mention Intel, the computer chip manufacturer, which I found super intriguing.
Yes, Intel's core values are a masterclass in balance. They list standard things like customer orientation and being a great place to work, but the juxtaposition of two specific values really stands out: risk-taking and discipline.
Wait, practically speaking, how does an employee actually do that? Like if my boss tells me to take massive risks, but also be perfectly disciplined with my budget, I'm just going to freeze.
Right. Sounds like a contradiction.
Yeah. How does a company prevent those values from completely canceling each other out?
It's a great question, and it highlights why explaining the how matters so much. In the tech industry, taking a massive risk means investing billions of dollars into a brand new microchip architecture, or, building a new fabrication plant.
Right.
That's the risk. If you don't take it, your competitors leave you in the dust and you go bankrupt. But you can't just blindly throw $10 billion at a hunch.
Obviously not.
So the discipline comes in through rigorous, peer-reviewed market research, intense expenditure tracking, and strict adherence to deadlines. The risk dictates what mountains they decide to climb. The discipline dictates how they pack their gear for the ascent.
Wow. That's a great way to put it.
It tells stakeholders exactly how they operate under pressure.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though. We've talked about these beautiful, balanced statements.
Yeah.
But what happens if a company is hypocritical?
Yeah.
What happens when a company preaches one thing in its shiny mission statement, but the underlying code is completely broken?
It destroys the reputation almost instantly. Mission and core values are long-term public commitments. They're promises. And if you are inconsistent, you're quickly undermined. The sources use a very simple example. You can't preach to your customers that your company aims to have a low-carbon footprint, while at the exact same time telling your own employees not to bother with recycling in the break room.
The hypocrisy becomes painfully obvious. It's like the corrupted hard drive we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
User interface says eco-friendly, but the internal processing says we don't actually care.
Yeah.
And eventually the system crashes.
And that disconnect is much more common than executives want to admit. There's some truly shocking data from a Boston Consulting Group survey in our sources. The survey found that about 27% of bosses believe their employees are inspired by and completely aligned with the company's core principles and mission.
I mean, 27% is already incredibly low for the people running the company. But what did the employees actually say?
Only a dismal 4% of employees agreed.
4%. Wait, that is a massive 23% disconnect?
It gets worse. 41% of bosses said their firm rewards performance based on values rather than just purely financial results. But only 14% of employees believed that was true.
Okay, so if the executives at the top have this beautiful, mathematically perfect mission statement that flawlessly balances risk and discipline, why did that survey say only 4% of employees actually care?
Yeah.
Like, where exactly does the message die on its way down the corporate ladder? Let's look at the Shannon-Weaver communication model. Walk us through how this model explains the journey of a message. What's the first step of that journey?
So the Shannon-Weaver model shows that communication has 5 stages. An information source like the board of directors, a transmitter that designs the message, a channel like an email, a receiver that decodes it, and the final destination, which is the stakeholder. For the message to be successful, it must travel through all these stages and actually be understood and acted upon by the recipient.
Right, but clearly, based on that 4% alignment stat,
Yeah.
messages don't always survive that journey. What gets in the way?
Well, this process is constantly interrupted by barriers known as noise, which can prevent or completely distort the original message. This noise could be information overload, where the recipient is too overwhelmed to care, technical failures like a broken web link, or language difficulties when translating across global offices.
Oh, it's so easy to picture that. A CEO sends out a 50-page PDF on core values, and the employee's just too swamped with their daily tasks to read past page 1. That's information overload. But noise isn't always just a technical glitch or a translation error, is it?
No, interestingly, noise isn't just technical. It heavily involves the human element, like employees being deeply reluctant to change their behavior. It also includes status differences, where remote management becomes isolated from employees and is completely unwilling to hear bad news about the company's performance.
That status difference is huge. All right, if the executives are sitting in a glass tower, looking at a spreadsheet, totally removed from the warehouse floor where employees are sweating to meet impossible quotas, that physical and social distance creates a massive amount of noise. The executives simply cannot hear the reality of what's happening. So, since we know that noise can easily ruin a message, how do modern organizations actively fight through that noise to actually reach their stakeholders? So what does this all mean for the real world? They aren't just mailing out massive PDFs to everyone, right?
Definitely not. Organizations have to be incredibly strategic about the channels they use to bypass that noise. There's been a massive shift toward cheaper, more environmentally friendly methods. Instead of printing and mailing heavy financial statements to every single shareholder, many companies now just email a web link.
Which, ironically, is a brilliant way of modeling a core value.
Right.
If your company claims to value sustainability, not printing millions of pages of financial reports
Yeah.
is a great way to actually live that value while communicating it.
Exactly. Actions speak louder than corporate memos. And that brings us to social media, which is a fascinating channel for bypassing Shannon-Weaver noise. You can't just post a dry philosophical mission statement on Facebook.
Well, I was reading that.
Right. The information is too ephemeral. Instead, companies use social media to show their values in action.
Show, don't tell. How does a massive company like Tesco do that in practice?
Well, Tesco uses Facebook not for dry statements, but to promote things like 2-kilometer fun runs for school children or highlighting an employee doing a parachute jump for the Alzheimer's Society.
That's brilliant because it bypasses the analytical, cynical part of the brain. It's not a boring press release saying, we care about the community.
Yeah.
It's subliminally proving their commitment to the community by actually participating in it.
Exactly.
And the sources mentioned ACCA does something similar, right?
Yes, ACCA uses Facebook to promote global diversity and their practical experience requirements, or PER. Showing people globally interacting is living proof of their mission, although it is worth noting an exception.
There's always an exception.
Always. HSBC, the massive bank, largely ignores social media for this. They rely almost entirely on their official website to carefully communicate their stances on sustainability.
Oh, because banking relies so heavily on risk aversion and absolute security.
Precisely.
So it really depends on the brand identity. But what about visual channels? Video has to be one of the most powerful ways to cut through that human noise we talked about.
Without a doubt. The cooperative group is a perfect example of this. They are a mutual organization, meaning they're owned by their customers, not Wall Street shareholders. They used a highly produced TV advert to differentiate their ethical approach to business.
Why spend millions on a TV ad for that, though? Why not just send a newsletter to their customer owners?
Because you can't fit a lot of hard data into 60 seconds of video, but you can convey an incredible amount of ethos and emotion. They needed to remind their customers that they were participating in an ethical community. Video bypasses the analytical noise.
And Etihad Airlines took a similar approach, but for a completely different audience, right?
Yes, Etihad had used a video specifically designed for staff recruitment. The language is packed with their core values, challenging the status quo, embracing optimism. By using this right at the beginning, they actively filter for people who already align with their mission.
That's a very clever way to preempt the noise. If you only hire people who already believe in your underlying code, you don't have to shout as loud to get them to listen later on.
Exactly.
And what about public relations? PR seems like it could easily slip into that hollow corporate speak category if an organization isn't careful.
It definitely can, but when used strategically, it's incredibly effective. GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, uses PR and press releases to announce tangible, real-world actions, like their global partnerships to defeat neglected tropical diseases or initiatives with King's College London to inspire young people into science ahead of the Olympics.
Right, so it gets the media to organically spread the proof of their core values for them.
Yeah, extending their reach far beyond their normal audience.
Okay, I have to challenge this, though. We're talking about all these polished channels, a beautifully produced Etihad video, a heartwarming Tesco Facebook post. What happens when a company beautifully communicates its values through all these modern channels, but completely fails to act on them? Like when the underlying reality is a total lie, when the noise isn't a broken web link, but the fact that the company's actions are fundamentally corrupt.
Then you get the ultimate cautionary tale. The sources bring up News Corporation. If you went to their website at the time, you could download their standards of business conduct. It was a beautiful, comprehensive document outlining their deep commitment to the public, to stockholders, and to the community.
So it looked completely perfect on paper. The user interface was flawless.
Completely flawless. But the reality was the UK phone hacking scandal. The activities of their journalists completely contradicted every single core value they had published. They were breaking the law to get scoops.
The disconnect between the stated values and the actual behavior was catastrophic.
Catastrophic is the right word. It caused massive public outrage, a huge public inquiry, and severe financial fallout. They had to reach substantial settlements with victims. The sources note that just the first 15 settlements made public totaled around $1 million.
Wow.
But the true cost was the reputational damage.
Right, because a massive corporation can pay $1 million fine and survive. But how do you rebuild trust?
It's nearly impossible.
When advertisers pull out and the public cancels subscriptions, that is the literal mechanism of reputational destruction.
It severely alienated their stakeholders for years. This raises an important question for you to think about today. Look at the company you work for, or your favorite brand. Are their stated core values actually reflected in how they treat you, or are they experiencing a massive Shannon Weaver noise problem?
That's a great point. And before we wrap up, think about this too. We spent all this time talking about how humans process these values and the human noise in the system, the status differences, the reluctance to change. But as AI starts drafting our corporate communications and even like conducting our initial job interviews, how is an algorithm supposed to evaluate whether a candidate actually aligns with the human core value?
That's a huge unknown.
Right. Can a machine detect if an employee truly understands lifetime loyalty? Or will it just introduce an entirely new kind of Shannon Weaver noise into the corporate ladder? That's something to chew on. And that's a wrap on today's episode. I hope communicating core values and mission feels clearer now than it did a few minutes ago. That's always the goal. If this helped you, please follow the show and leave a review on Spotify. It genuinely helps more ACCA students find us. Keep pushing. You're closer to that path than you think. Until next Wednesday, thank you for listening.